Okay, this is number 22 on the extra practice worksheet. You're given f of x equals the square root of x squared minus 5 and g of x equals the square root of 9 minus x squared, and you want to find the domain of f of g of x. Okay, so f of g of x, that's what the fog x means. The domain for that, you have to have the domain of the inside, so I need the domain of g of x. And then once I do the composition, I have to find the domain of the entire thing and then see where the two domains intersect. So you have to have the domain of the inside, though, because if you are plugging in a number that's not in the domain of the inside, your function won't work at all to begin with. So the domain of g of x, you have the square root of x squared, or 9 minus x squared, has to be greater than or equal to 0, because you have to have a positive under the square root. You can square both sides, so you get 9 minus x squared is greater than or equal to 0. And this factors to 3 plus x, 3 minus x. Okay, so this is a inequality, but it's a polynomial inequality. It's quadratic, right? It's not a linear inequality, so I can't just put it greater than or equal to 0 and solve and move the x squared over and get my answer, because it gets one of your answers wrong. So you have to find the zeros. So I'm going to set this equal to 0, and I get x equals negative 3 and positive 3, and then I have to do sign analysis. Okay, so if you have an inequality that's not linear, so it's quadratic or polynomial, or if it's irrational, you have to do sign analysis to figure out where it works. Okay, so I'll put my negative 3 in, my positive 3 in. We're greater than or equal to 0, so I have dots on both. Then I want to look at my factored form. Okay, so my factored form is right here. And plug in something to the left of negative 3. So to the left of negative 3, if I pick negative 10, if I plug in a negative 10, 3 minus 10 is negative. 3 minus negative 10 is going to give you a positive. Okay, so if I plug in a negative 10, this is going to be a negative section. Okay, if I plug in something between negative 3 and 3, so 0, 3 plus 0 is positive, 3 minus 0 is also positive, so this section is positive. And then if I plug in something bigger than 3, so like positive 10, 3 plus 10 is positive, 3 minus 10 is negative, that's going to be negative. So my domain of g of x, just g of x, domain of g of x is from negative 3 to positive 3. Okay, it's just this section right in here that was positive. Now I can go ahead and do the composition, do f of g of x, figure out what the entire thing is, and then figure out the domain of that, and then see where they overlap. Okay, so come over here. F of g of x means I have f, and I'm putting the g of x in for the x, so 9 minus x squared. Okay, looking at my equation, I have the square root of 9 minus x squared minus 5. Okay, the square root of 9 minus x squared is just, we have the square root of 9 minus x squared minus 5, which gives me the square root of 4 minus x squared. So f of g of x equals 4 minus x squared. Okay, now we need to find the domain of that. That means 4 minus x squared has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, whatever's under that square root, you can write the square root and square it if you want, or you can just write the underneath part. So on the blue over on the right, I did it with the square root, and then I squared both sides, got the same thing. On the left over here in the purple, I didn't do that. But that factors to 2 plus x times 2 minus x. Set them equal to 0, so your zeros are negative 2 and 2. Okay, put them on a number line. So sign analysis again because we have a quadratic. Negative 2, 2, they are equal. So put dots in there, fill them in, and then plug in points. Okay, so if I plug in something to the left of negative 2, that's like a negative 10. That's going to be negative. 2 minus 10 is negative. 2 minus negative 10 is positive. So I get a negative section right here. Plug in 0, 2 plus 0 is positive, 2 minus 0 is also positive, so I get a positive section right here. And then plug in 10, 2 plus 10 is positive, 2 minus 10 is negative. So that gives me a negative section here. Okay, so my shaded area is right here between -2 and 2. Now I have to see where the two domains intersect. So I'm going to look over here on my blue graph and add my other one to it. So I have -2, +2. Okay, close dots on there, and then this one is shaded in between those two. So if you look at this graph with the two shadings, it's intersecting or overlapping from right here to right here, right? That's where the two overlap. So my domain of the entire thing is from -2 to +2, and that's my answer for that one.